The morning wind cut through the city like a blade, sharp and biting against Maya Thompson's skin as she hurried down Monroe Street, boots splashing through shallow puddles from last night's rain. Chicago was already awake, car horns, steam rising from manholes, the rattle of the elevated train overhead, a restless, humming city that demanded motion. Maya adjusted the strap of her worn leather purse and checked her watch, 7:45 a.m. 15 minutes to make it to Skyline Dynamics, the tech conglomerate where she'd been working as an administrative assistant for almost a year. The job was modest, but it paid for rent, groceries, and her 9-year-old daughter Layla's asthma medication, small victories that kept their fragile world from collapsing. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out as she walked, shielding the screen from the drizzle. Mrs. Green, Layla's babysitter, running a bit late. Be there soon. Maya groaned under her breath. Not again. She typed a quick reply, trying to keep her frustration in check. Please hurry. I have a meeting at 8:30 sharp. She slipped the phone back, weaving around a group of tourists taking selfies in front of a mural. A distant thunder of the subway echoed through the pavement. The chill bit deeper, and she tightened her scarf. She couldn't afford to be late. Not today. Her manager, Richard Hale, had already warned her twice about tardiness. Corporate life runs on punctuality, he'd said with that patronizing smirk that made her fists clench. She needed this job, not just the paycheck, but the insurance, the stability. Layla's next inhaler refill was due next week. She turned onto Wabash Avenue, the skyline looming like glass and steel giants. That's when she heard it, the screech of tires followed by a sharp, gut-wrenching thud. Maya froze. The sound echoed against the concrete canyon of buildings. Ahead, maybe 30 yards away, a man in a dark overcoat lay crumpled near the curb, papers fluttering in the wind like startled birds. A delivery cyclist sped off without a glance back, vanishing into traffic. Maya's heart raced. She looked down the street toward her office tower, only 3 blocks away. 7:48 a.m. She could still make it if she kept moving. But then the man groaned, trying to push himself up. Sir? Hey, are you okay? Her instincts overrode her fear. She ran to him, kneeling on the wet sidewalk. The man was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with light brown hair now matted by rain and a sharp jawline shadowed by stubble. His tailored gray suit was smeared with dirt and coffee from a shattered thermos beside him. I'm fine, he muttered through clenched teeth, trying to stand. He managed halfway before collapsing against the brick wall behind him, face tightening in pain. Maya reached out, steadying him. You're not fine. You might have hit your head or something. It's just my ankle, he said, grimacing. I have a meeting I can't miss. She glanced down. His right foot was twisted at an unnatural angle inside an expensive leather shoe. You're not going anywhere on that. She grabbed her phone. I'm calling an ambulance. He tried to protest. No ambulance. I don't. Save it, she cut him off. You can't even stand. The man's gray-blue eyes met hers, piercing even through pain. For a moment, they held, the world around them blurred into the rhythm of passing cars, falling rain, and her quick, shallow breaths. Fine, he finally said, his voice low but resigned. Just, please make it fast. Maya called 911, explaining the situation quickly. As she waited for help to arrive, she gathered the scattered papers from the street. One page caught her attention, thick ivory letterhead with embossed text. Alexander Grant, Chief Executive Officer, Skyline Dynamics. Her stomach dropped. She blinked, staring again to make sure she'd read it right. Alexander Grant, the billionaire founder, the man whose face was on the company's investor reports, the man who ran the empire she worked for from the glass tower on Michigan Avenue. You work at Skyline? She asked, her voice faltering. He nodded faintly. Yes. You? I'm an assistant in operations. She almost laughed at the absurdity. Of all people, she just found her CEO lying on the sidewalk. Before she could say more, the wail of sirens approached. 2 paramedics jogged over, assessing him quickly. As they confirmed her suspicion, a broken ankle, she stepped back, watching as they prepared to load him onto the stretcher. Alexander reached out suddenly, his hand brushing hers. Thank you, he said, his tone sincere, strained. Most people would have kept walking. Maya smiled faintly, despite the anxiety twisting in her stomach. It was the right thing to do. Still, he said, wincing as they lifted him, you probably just made yourself late. It's fine, she lied, glancing at her watch, 8:12 a.m. She was finished. Hale would destroy her. Could you, he paused, his voice softer, come with me? Just until they get me settled? I hate hospitals. Maya hesitated. Following him would mean sealing her fate. But something in his tone, the vulnerability behind his authority, made her nod. Okay. She climbed into the ambulance beside him. As they sped through traffic, Alexander tried to joke about bad luck and broken bones, but Maya could see the pain etched across his face. At the hospital, things moved quickly. X-rays confirmed the break, and while nurses worked around him, Maya helped fill out his intake forms. The staff treated him with polite efficiency, but none seemed to realize who he was, just another patient in a gray hospital gown. By the time he was fitted with a cast, it was past 9:30. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from her co-worker, Dana. Richard's furious. Asked where you were. I said emergency. He didn't care. Her chest tightened. She stood, gathering her purse. I should go, Mr. Grant. Alexander, he corrected. She nodded. Alexander. I hope your ankle heals quickly. Wait, he started, but she was already halfway out the door. When she finally reached Skyline headquarters, it was 10:15 a.m. The marble lobby gleamed, all glass, chrome, and cold light. She could see her reflection in the elevator doors, wind-tossed hair, smudged makeup, damp coat. Richard Hale was waiting at her desk. His face said everything. My office, he snapped. Behind the closed door, he didn't bother with questions. This is your third late arrival this quarter, Maya. You know the policy. There was an accident, she began, someone was hurt. Someone's always hurt, he interrupted, his tone like ice. You think this company runs on sympathy? Her hands clenched at her sides. I've never missed a deadline, never failed a task. It doesn't matter. You're done here. He slid a form across the desk, termination notice. You have until noon to clear your things. Her throat tightened, eyes stinging. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, he said, leaning back with smug satisfaction. This is corporate America, Maya. Not charity. She stared at the paper, her reflection faint in its gloss. A deep calm washed over her, that quiet, hollow kind that comes after too much fear. She'd done what any decent person would do. If this was the cost of humanity, then maybe this job wasn't worth it after all. As she packed her few desk items, a framed photo of Layla, a half-dead succulent, a mug with hash mom mode printed in fading gold, she wondered how she'd explain this to her daughter. Outside, the late morning sun reflected off the skyline like fractured glass. She shifted the cardboard box in her arms and walked toward the bus stop. Her phone rang. Maya, it's Mrs. Green. Did you make it to work okay? Not exactly, she said softly. I got fired. Mrs. Green gasped on the other end. Oh, honey, for what? For helping someone who needed it. That's terrible. But you did the right thing. Maya sat down at the bench, balancing the box on her knees. I'll start looking for something else right away. I might need to cut back on Layla's hours. Nonsense, Mrs. Green interrupted. Layla stays with me until you're back on your feet. Don't you worry about that. Tears pricked her eyes. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. You do just fine, sweetheart, the older woman said warmly. But you're not alone. Back in her apartment, a modest two-bedroom on the south side, Maya set the box on the kitchen counter and exhaled slowly. The room was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. She should have been updating her resume, but exhaustion hit her like a wave. She sat on the couch and closed her eyes, meaning to rest for just a minute. When her phone buzzed again, it was 1:30 p.m. unknown number. Hello? Miss Thompson? The voice on the other end was professional, crisp, female. This is Laura King, executive assistant to Alexander Grant at Skyline Dynamics. Mr. Grant would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, if you're available. Maya sat upright. He wants to see me? Yes? He was quite insistent. Her mind raced. Of course. I'll be there. After she hung up, Maya sat in stunned silence, staring at her reflection in the dark TV screen. The CEO, the man she'd helped that morning, wanted to see her. Maybe, just maybe, her life hadn't completely fallen apart. Morning sunlight spilled through the towering glass facade of Skyline Dynamics as Maya stood in the lobby, palms damp, heart racing. She wore her best outfit, a crisp white blouse tucked into a navy pencil skirt, the same blazer she'd worn to her interview almost a year ago. It wasn't new, but it made her feel composed, capable. At the front desk, The security guard checked a list and looked up. "You're on Mr. Grant's guest list, Miss Thompson. Take the executive elevator to the top floor." Maya blinked. "Executive elevator?" He smiled. "Straight ahead, to your right. It opens directly into his office." Her reflection trembled slightly in the polished elevator doors. As they closed, she felt her stomach tighten. The quiet hum of ascent wrapped around her, smooth and soundless, a different world from the floor she used to work on, where printers clattered and people whispered complaints about deadlines. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, the skyline sparkling beyond. The air smelled faintly of cedar and espresso. "Miss Thompson?" A tall woman with silver-streaked hair and striking posture approached. "I'm Laura King. We spoke on the phone. Mr. Grant is expecting you." Laura's tone was polite, measured, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who managed billion-dollar schedules and never missed a beat. "Thank you," Maya said softly. Laura opened a set of frosted glass doors. "Go right in." Inside, Alexander Grant sat behind a wide walnut desk, his right leg elevated on a stool, a sleek black cast visible against his tailored trousers. The morning light painted him in sharp contrast, composed yet human, power softened by pain. He looked up from his laptop. "Maya Thompson. Please, come in." She stepped closer, nerves crackling through her every movement. "Good morning, Mr. Grant." "Alexander," he corrected with a small smile. "Please, sit." She lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her hands twisted in her lap. "How's your ankle?" "Functional," he said with a light shrug. 6 weeks in this thing, maybe 7. But it could have been worse. The doctor says I'm lucky." Maya exhaled softly. "I'm glad to hear that." A pause settled between them, comfortable yet heavy with unspoken questions. Alexander studied her face for a moment, her steady eyes, the calm she tried to wear like armor. "I understand you were terminated yesterday," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "Yes, I was. I was late, because of what happened with you. My supervisor didn't see it as a valid reason." "Richard Hale," Alexander said, his voice hardening. "I've reviewed your file." Maya blinked. "You, what?" "I had HR pull your record this morning." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Your performance evaluations were strong. Excellent, actually. There's nothing in them that justifies dismissal." Maya's voice faltered. "That doesn't really change anything, does it?" He already processed it. Alexander's eyes sharpened. "It changes everything. You did the right thing, and you were punished for it. That's not the kind of culture I want in my company." For a long moment, Maya didn't speak. The CEO of Skyline Dynamics was sitting here, telling her that compassion mattered more than policy. The same company that had discarded her without hesitation. "I didn't help you because of who you are," she said finally. "I didn't even know. I just couldn't leave someone like that." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly why I asked you here." Her pulse quickened. "I want to offer you a position," he continued, "but not your old one. Something better." Maya blinked. "Better?" "I need a new executive assistant. Laura is moving into operations next month, and I want someone I can trust, someone grounded, decisive, empathetic." He watched her expression carefully. "It's not just about scheduling meetings. It's about handling people, reading situations. You proved yesterday you can do that under pressure." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. She let out a nervous laugh. "I don't have the qualifications for something like that." Alexander shook his head. "Qualifications can be taught. Character can't." She looked down at her hands, thinking of Layla, of overdue bills, of how her world had shifted overnight. "What's the salary?" "Double what you were making. Full benefits, flexible schedule, corporate car service. And there's one more thing." She looked up. "We're launching a new foundation, the Skyline Hope Initiative. It's focused on helping single parents in the workforce. I'd like you to serve as liaison alongside me." Her breath caught. "Single parents?" "Yes. You understand that world better than anyone in this building. We need that perspective." Maya hesitated, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Why me, really? There must be people with master's degrees lined up for a chance to work this close to you." He leaned forward, his voice lower now. "Because you're the only person I've met in years who did something selfless without calculating what it might cost her." I want that kind of integrity beside me. Maya met his eyes, blue-gray like storm clouds over the lake, and saw no trace of flattery, just truth. When would I start? She asked softly. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Tomorrow morning. She laughed despite herself. You don't waste time, do you? Time, he said, is the one thing even billionaires can't buy back. By the time she left his office, her world had tilted again, only this time, toward something brighter. The next morning felt surreal. She woke before dawn, pressed Layla's uniform, made breakfast, braided her hair. When her daughter asked, "Are you going back to work, Mommy?" Maya smiled. Something like that. She arrived 20 minutes early, the skyline still wrapped in morning haze. A black town car waited at the curb, her name glowing on the dashboard tablet. At the top floor, Laura greeted her warmly. "Welcome aboard, Maya. Alexander's running a few minutes late, board call. Let me show you around." The suite was vast, 2 adjoining offices, a private conference room, and a reception area overlooking the city. It felt less like an office and more like the control center of an empire. Laura briefed her on protocols, introductions, schedules. Maya listened carefully, jotting notes. When Alexander emerged, she stood. "You came back," he said with an approving grin. "I said I would." "Good. Let's make history." The weeks that followed blurred into rhythm, long days, steady learning, quiet confidence building inside her. Maya adapted quickly, mastering the complex calendar, deciphering coded emails from department heads, managing crises before they reached Alexander's desk. He noticed everything, her calm under pressure, her humor, her precision. Slowly, their conversations extended beyond work. He asked about Layla, her favorite music, the little diner she stopped at for coffee. He told her about his mother's art gallery in Boston, about how he'd built Skyline from a tiny garage startup into a global brand. And in those moments, between conference calls and car rides, a new understanding began to form, fragile and unspoken. 3 months later, Maya's life hardly resembled what it had been. Her small apartment had given way to a light-filled condo downtown, with space for Layla's drawings to cover the fridge. The job had given her more than money, it had given her stability, dignity, and something she hadn't felt in years, possibility. The Skyline Hope Initiative became her passion. Working side by side with Alexander, she built programs to provide scholarships and daycare support for single working parents. The foundation's gala was set for the following month, and Maya would deliver one of the keynote addresses. Her phone chimed with a message. "Alexander, need your input on the Brightline proposal. Dinner meeting at 7, same place. Car picks you up at 6:30. She smiled, typing back, "I'll be ready." When the car arrived, Layla ran to the door, giggling. "Is that for you, Mommy?" "It is. Are you going to see Mr. Grant?" Maya hesitated. "Yes, sweetie. Work dinner." Her daughter grinned mischievously. "You smile every time you say his name." Maya laughed, ruffling her hair. "Go on, brush your teeth." Downtown shimmered with city lights as the car pulled up to the curb of an upscale bistro. Alexander emerged from the back seat, cane in hand though his cast had been removed. His presence filled the night air effortlessly, confident yet calm, power wrapped in ease. "Sorry for the short notice," he said, opening the door for her. "You don't have to apologize. It's part of the job." Inside, the restaurant buzzed softly, low light, linen tables, the faint hum of jazz. They dined in a private alcove, going over documents and ideas, their conversation flowing as naturally as the wine between them. "This proposal," Alexander said, tapping the tablet, "could redefine our community outreach. But I want your take, from the ground level." Maya leaned forward, scanning the figures. "If you break implementation into stages, starting with local partnerships instead of national, you'll get faster impact and better press traction." He studied her thoughtfully, then smiled. "You're right. Again." She laughed softly. "You make it sound like I always am." "You usually are," he said, and there was something in his tone, something unguarded. When they left, the air outside had turned cool and still. As they waited for the car, Alexander glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You've changed this place, you know," he said quietly. She frowned slightly. "Skyline?" "No. Me." Before she could respond, the driver pulled up. In the soft glow of the streetlight, their eyes met, a brief, electric silence. He opened the door for her, his hand brushing hers just slightly, and for one dizzy moment she forgot the line between professionalism and something far deeper. When the car stopped in front of her building, he insisted on walking her to the lobby. "Thank you for tonight," he said, voice low. "Your insight, it's invaluable." "Just doing my job," she said, smiling. He hesitated. "It's more than that, Maya. You're more than that." She opened her mouth, but the elevator doors slid open behind her, silver and soundless. "Good night, Alexander," she whispered. He nodded slowly, watching her step inside. "Good night, Maya." As the doors closed, she exhaled, her reflection flickering over glass, the face of a woman who wasn't sure if she was crossing into something beautiful or dangerous. The following weeks passed in a blur of motion and late nights. The Skyline Hope initiative had gained traction faster than anyone expected, and Maya found herself in the center of something bigger than she'd ever imagined. News outlets wanted interviews. Donors wanted meetings. Alexander wanted everything to be perfect for the foundation's launch gala at the Silverstone Hotel. Most nights, the office lights on the top floor burned long after the city outside had gone dark. From her desk, Maya could see the river reflecting Chicago's skyline like a mirror, lights trembling across the black water. Sometimes Alexander would call her into his office with 2 mugs of coffee, and they'd talk, not about reports or logistics, but life. He told her about his father, a strict Navy officer who had wanted him to follow a conventional path. About his failed marriage years ago, when he'd buried himself in work to avoid the silence of an empty penthouse. And Maya told him about Layla, the laughter, the asthma scares, the nights spent balancing spreadsheets on one side of the table while helping her daughter build cardboard solar systems on the other. Their conversations blurred the line between boss and colleague, until it became something else entirely: quiet familiarity, deepening warmth, the sense that they understood each other in ways that had nothing to do with work. One evening, as Maya reviewed the event seating chart on her tablet, she heard his voice behind her. "Working late again?" She turned to see him leaning on his cane by the door, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. The city lights outlined him in gold. "Trying to make sure every billionaire and senator has the right table," she said, smiling faintly. "The politics of philanthropy." He chuckled. "You're good at it. Better than me, most days." "I doubt that." He crossed the room, resting his hand lightly on the back of her chair. "You underestimate yourself. That's your only flaw." Her breath caught at how close he was. His cologne, subtle, clean, mixed with the faint scent of coffee. She turned, their eyes locking. "Alexander," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "we should probably keep things professional," he finished softly. "Yes. I know." But neither of them moved. The silence pulsed between them, charged, undeniable. Then his phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the spell. He sighed, glancing at the screen. "Board chair. I should take this." Maya stood, trying to compose herself. "Of course." He hesitated, looking at her one last time before stepping into his private office. That night, she lay awake long after midnight, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the way he'd looked at her, not as an employee, but as a woman he wanted to understand. The next morning, the rhythm of work resumed: meetings, calls, decisions. But the unspoken current between them had changed. Every glance lingered too long, every smile carried weight. 2 days later, as Maya was reviewing final logistics for the gala, Laura appeared at her doorway. "Alexander's ex-wife is here to see him." Maya looked up sharply. "His what?" "Vanessa Hart." She didn't have an appointment, but he said to let her in. Before Maya could respond, the glass doors to his office opened, and a tall woman strode in, flawless, poised, dressed in a designer coat that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Her hair fell in glossy waves, her stride confident. Vanessa Hart. The name carried weight, an attorney known for her ruthless brilliance and high-profile cases. Maya tried to focus on her screen, but the sound of their voices carried faintly through the door. Calm at first, then sharper. When Vanessa left 20 minutes later, her heels clicked against the marble like punctuation marks. She glanced at Maya briefly, an assessing look, quick but sharp enough to sting, before disappearing into the elevator. Alexander emerged a moment later, running a hand through his hair. "Everything okay?" Maya asked carefully. He sighed. "That was complicated." "You don't have to explain." He looked at her for a long moment. "I think I do. Vanessa's opening a new branch of her firm here in Chicago. She wanted to reconnect." "Rekindle?" Maya asked before she could stop herself. His brow lifted, amused. Her words, not mine. But no, that's not going to happen. Maya forced a smile. Good to know. For scheduling purposes, of course. He laughed quietly. Of course. Still, when she went home that evening, her mind refused to quiet. She pictured the woman's elegance, her effortless confidence. They made sense together, the billionaire and the brilliant attorney, both polished, powerful, belonging to the same world. Maya felt small beside that image. She tried to drown it out with chores, Layla's dinner, laundry, packing her lunch, but the ache lingered. Later that night, as she stood on her balcony watching the city lights flicker, her phone buzzed. Alexander, are you all right? You left the office quickly. She stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she typed, just tired. Big day tomorrow. His reply came almost instantly. Vanessa's visit was unexpected. Don't let it bother you. It didn't, she lied. The next morning, she arrived early for the gala rehearsal at the Silverstone. The ballroom gleamed under chandeliers, every table draped in ivory linen. Staff hurried between podiums and floral arrangements, and Maya moved among them like the quiet force keeping everything from unraveling. Alexander arrived an hour later, crisp in a dark suit, and when he saw her, something in his expression softened. Everything looks incredible, he said. You've outdone yourself. Let's see if I can make it through the rehearsal without tripping over the teleprompter. He smiled. You'll do great. You always do. Their rehearsal went smoothly, her speech timed perfectly, his introduction sincere and warm. When it ended, applause echoed faintly through the empty hall. That was powerful, he said afterward. You're going to move people tomorrow night. I just hope I don't cry on stage, she joked, though emotion already pressed at her throat. This foundation means everything to me. It means something to me too, he said quietly. Because of you. She met his gaze, heart pounding. Because of me? He nodded. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. To make a difference. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. Before she could respond, Laura approached with a clipboard. Sorry to interrupt, press team wants to confirm tomorrow's arrival schedule. Maya nodded, grateful for the break in tension. But as she turned back, Alexander was still watching her, his eyes unreadable. That evening, after putting Layla to bed, Maya stood before her closet. The gown hung there like a secret, midnight blue silk, a gift from Alexander she tried not to think too much about. He'd said it was for the gala, but the note that had accompanied it, "You deserve to feel seen," had lodged itself deep in her chest. When she slipped it on the next night, it fit as if it had been made for her. You look like a princess, Mommy, Layla said, eyes wide. Maya smiled, crouching to kiss her cheek. Thank you, baby. Be good for Mrs. Green, okay? As she left the apartment, nerves fluttered in her stomach. She told herself it was just the event, all those cameras, speeches, guests. But deep down, she knew it was something else entirely. At the Silverstone, the ballroom shimmered, candlelight reflecting off crystal, the hum of conversation rising like music. Donors, politicians, celebrities, all gathered under the banner of Skyline Hope. When Alexander arrived, she saw him before he saw her. He wore a black tuxedo, sharp and timeless, his presence commanding. But when his eyes found her across the room, something in his expression shifted. Surprise, admiration, something unspoken that made her pulse quicken. He crossed to her, his voice low. You look stunning. Thank you, she said softly. You clean up pretty well yourself. He smiled, but there was a gravity in his eyes. Can we talk after the speeches? Of course. When it was her turn on stage, the lights felt blinding, the crowd endless. But she spoke from her heart, about struggle, resilience, compassion. About how one act of kindness had cost her a job but given her something greater, a purpose. When she finished, the room rose in applause. Alexander was on his feet, pride in his eyes. Afterward, as the band played and guests mingled, he found her by the balcony. The night air was cool, the city glowing below. You were extraordinary, he said. Every word. She turned toward him, her heart steady but full. I meant every one of them. I know you did. He took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking. Maya, there's something I've wanted to tell you since the day we met on that sidewalk. Her breath caught. Alexander. He hesitated, his voice barely above the hum of the city. I tried to tell you weeks ago, before Vanessa showed up. But I didn't want to blur the lines while you were still finding your footing here. What lines? She asked, though she already knew. The ones between professionalism and how I actually feel about you. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. The night around them seemed to fade, just the two of them, suspended in the glow of the skyline. The city glittered below them, 1,000 lights trembling on the surface of the river. The noise of the gala was distant now, muffled by the tall glass doors behind them. Maya stood still, the cool wind brushing against her bare shoulders, her pulse echoing in her throat. Alexander took another step toward her. His expression was unreadable, composed, but charged with something that felt dangerously close to longing. "I've spent months trying to find the right words," he said quietly. "But there aren't any. Not for this." Maya's voice barely carried above the breeze. "You don't have to say anything." "I do." He paused, eyes fixed on hers. "That day you helped me, I thought it was coincidence. Now I think it was something else. You walked into my life when I didn't even realize how much I needed someone to remind me what kindness looks like." Her breath trembled. "Alexander." He moved a little closer, his voice low, steady. "You changed everything, how I see people, how I see this company, how I see myself. And every day since then, I've had to remind myself that you work for me, that there are boundaries I can't cross." She swallowed hard. "Those boundaries exist for a reason." "I know," he said. "And if you tell me right now that this means nothing to you, I'll never bring it up again. But if there's even a chance you feel the same." He stopped, searching her face, as if the answer was written there in the shimmer of her eyes. Her voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "I can't afford to be a rumor, Alexander. Not after everything I've fought for." His jaw tightened. "You won't be." "You can't promise that," she said. "You're the CEO. I'm your assistant. People will see what they want to see." He looked away toward the skyline. "You're right. They will. But they'll also see that the woman beside me built something that's changing lives. That's what matters." Her heart ached with the sincerity in his voice, the quiet conviction that had drawn her to him long before she admitted it to herself. "I care about you," he said finally, turning back to her. "More than I've wanted to admit. And I've been afraid that saying it out loud would ruin everything. But pretending it isn't there, that's worse." The words hung between them, fragile and alive. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Maya stepped closer, until she could see the faint reflection of city lights in his eyes. "I care about you too," she said softly. "And that's what scares me." He exhaled, a slow, shaky breath, the kind of release that comes when something long restrained finally finds its way out. "Then we're both terrified." A faint laugh slipped from her lips. "Seems that way." They stood in silence, the air electric with everything they couldn't say. Inside, the band struck up another song. Finally, Alexander said, "Whatever happens after tonight, I want you to know, you've already changed my life. If that's all this ever is, that's enough." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "That's not all it is." He didn't move, didn't reach for her, but the look they shared was enough to bridge everything words couldn't. When the night ended, Maya rode home in the back of a company car, the city sliding by in streaks of gold and blue. She leaned her head against the window, the image of him standing on that balcony burned into her mind. At home, Mrs. Green had fallen asleep on the couch while Layla dozed in her room. Maya covered the older woman with a blanket, then sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at her reflection in a half-empty glass of water. The foundation launch had been perfect. Her speech had made headlines before the night was even over. And yet, all she could think about was that conversation, the tremor in his voice, the truth she'd seen in his eyes. Over the next few days, things at work returned to normal, at least on the surface. But the air between them was different now. Every meeting felt charged. Every casual exchange carried the weight of what they had enacted on. He kept his word. He never brought it up again. But sometimes, when she caught him watching her across the conference table, she knew he hadn't stopped thinking about it either. A week later, as the office emptied for the evening, Maya gathered her things. She was the last to leave, the hum of the city faint through the tall windows. Alexander's light was still on. She hesitated, then knocked softly on his door. "Come in," he called. He looked up from his laptop, smiling faintly. "You should be home by now." "I was just finishing reports for the foundation," she said. "Didn't want to leave anything hanging." He nodded, leaning back. "You've done more than enough. Go home, Maya." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "Why me? Out of everyone you could have working beside you, People with more experience, more credentials. Why did you pick me? He thought for a moment before answering. Because you make this place human. Because you see people, not just profit. Because when I'm in a room full of people who agree with everything I say, you're the one who tells me when I'm wrong. And because when you walk in, it reminds me that there's still good in this world that can't be bought. Maya stood there for a moment, unable to speak. Then she said quietly, "You're going to make it very hard to keep things professional." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's already true for me." She laughed softly. "You should get some rest, Alexander." "You too, Maya." As she left, he watched her go, the soft click of the door closing leaving a silence that felt heavier than any boardroom debate. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. The city seemed to hum with unseen life, the same pulse that had carried her through every storm she'd survived. She knew what she felt was real, and that frightened her more than losing any job ever could. Days turned into weeks, and their connection settled into something unspoken but constant. They learned to navigate the balance, late-night planning sessions, working lunches, small smiles in passing. Then came the message that would change everything again. "Alexander, need you in Boston for the weekend. Donor Summit. Bring foundation materials." It was short, businesslike, but her pulse jumped when she read it. A weekend away. She reminded herself it was work, a presentation, meetings, nothing more. Still, when she boarded the plane beside him 2 days later, the cabin lights reflecting in his eyes, the quiet between them felt too intimate to ignore. They landed in a snow-dusted Boston evening. The summit was held in a historic hotel overlooking the harbor, elegant, quiet, the kind of place where the world outside felt very far away. After dinner with donors, Maya returned to her room, exhausted. But sleep wouldn't come. She paced to the window, watching the snow drift against the glass. Her phone buzzed on the desk. "Alexander, are you awake?" She stared at the message, heart thudding. After a long pause, she replied, "Yes." A moment later, "Come down to the lobby for a minute. There's something I want to show you." She hesitated, then slipped on her coat and went downstairs. The hotel lobby was quiet, lit by a crackling fire. Alexander stood near the window, his posture relaxed, his gaze turned toward the falling snow. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He turned, smiling faintly. "No. I kept thinking about how far we've come. This foundation, all of it." She stepped closer, her coat wrapped tight around her. "It's been a long road. Worth every step," he said. "You've changed more lives than you realize, Maya. Including mine." She looked up at him, the reflection of snowflakes dancing in his eyes. "You can't keep saying things like that." "Why not?" "Because I'll start believing them." He smiled gently. "Good." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said, almost whispering, "You scare me sometimes, Alexander." "Why?" "Because you make me think about a future I never planned for." He took a slow breath, his expression softening. "Then let's not plan it. Let's just see where it goes." Maya looked at him, the quiet certainty in his voice both terrifying and beautiful. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the city in silence. The snow had stopped by morning, leaving Boston glazed in silver. Maya watched from the hotel window as the city stirred awake, delivery trucks carving tracks through slush, commuters huddled in scarves, the harbor breathing mist into the cold. She hadn't slept. Her conversation with Alexander replayed in her mind, every word echoing like a question she couldn't yet answer. They had stood so close last night that she could feel his warmth, his certainty. And yet, beneath it all, she had felt the weight of everything that separated them. Power, reputation, the fragile balance they'd built. When she stepped into the conference room later that morning, Alexander was already there, reviewing notes. He looked up and smiled, a small, tired smile that mirrored her own. "Ready?" he asked. "Always." They presented flawlessly. The donors were impressed, the foundation secured new partnerships, and every handshake felt like progress. But through it all, they avoided the kind of glance that might reveal more than professionalism allowed. That night, after the summit's final dinner, Maya found herself alone on the terrace overlooking the harbor. The city lights shimmered across the water, distant and cold. She heard the soft sound of a door closing behind her and knew, without turning, who it was. "I figured you'd be out here," Alexander said quietly. "I needed some air." He stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. "You've been quiet since last night." "I've been thinking." "About us?" "Yes." She met his gaze. And about everything that could fall apart if we keep pretending this isn't complicated. He nodded slowly, looking out at the frozen water. I know. You built something incredible, Alexander. And I finally found something that feels like purpose. But if we blur the lines between personal and professional, both of those things could crumble. I'm willing to take that risk. She shook her head gently. You can afford to. I can't. The wind caught her hair, lifting it against the night. He reached out instinctively to steady her coat, his fingers brushing her sleeve, then stopping halfway. Maya. She looked up at him, her eyes steady, her voice soft. I care about you. You know that. But caring about someone isn't always enough to make it right. He exhaled, his breath clouding in the cold. So that's it. It has to be. For now. He turned away for a moment, jaw tight. For what it's worth, I don't regret a single second. Neither do I. They stood together for a long time, saying nothing. The harbor lights flickered, a faint horn sounded somewhere across the bay. Finally, she said, you should get some rest. Tomorrow's flight leaves early. He nodded, but didn't move. You'll still run the foundation, right? Of course. It's ours. I'm not walking away from that. He smiled faintly. Then I can live with that. The next morning, they flew back to Chicago in near silence. He read through reports, she stared out the window, watching clouds drift like slow-moving continents. When they landed, he offered her a ride, but she declined. I think I'll take the train, she said. Helps me think. He hesitated, then simply said, thank you, for everything. Thank you, she replied. At the office the following week, a subtle distance settled between them, an understanding neither needed to speak aloud. They worked with precision, side by side, their rhythm unchanged but their tone gentler, quieter. Word of their Boston success spread quickly, the foundation's growth exceeded projections. Maya threw herself into the work, mentoring new staff, refining outreach programs. She spoke at conferences, appeared on panels, became the public face of a movement she and Alexander had dreamed into existence. He, meanwhile, shifted focus toward innovation projects, traveling more often, trusting her to lead in his absence. Months passed. Spring melted into summer, and the city shed its gray skin. The warmth returned to the lakefront, children's laughter echoing through Grant Park. Maya and Layla spent weekends flying kites, eating ice cream, rediscovering the easy joys of ordinary life. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, an email from Alexander would appear, short, professional, but with an undertone she could still feel. Excellent report. You make this work matter. She'd reply with equal simplicity. It only matters because you gave it a chance to exist. They didn't meet outside of work again. Yet each time they passed in the corridor, the air between them still hummed with that same quiet recognition, what they'd shared, what they'd chosen not to risk. One late afternoon in early autumn, Maya walked into his office with a stack of documents for his signature. He was on a call but waved her in, motioning toward the chair across from him. She waited, glancing out at the skyline. The city looked different now, warmer, somehow. When he hung up, he smiled. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy. With saving the world. With trying to. He signed the papers, then paused. Do you ever regret it? The decision we made in Boston? She met his eyes. Every once in a while. But then I look at everything we've built and realize it was the only way. He nodded, the corners of his mouth curving into a quiet, almost wistful smile. You're remarkable, you know that. I'm just doing my job. Then keep doing it, he said softly. Because you're changing lives, including mine. She stood to leave, but before she reached the door, he added, if life ever looks different, if the timing ever changes, maybe we'll finish that conversation. She turned, her expression gentle. Maybe. But if not, this was enough. He smiled faintly. It was. Outside, the late-day sun turned the glass towers gold. Maya walked through the lobby, her reflection stretching across the marble floor. The city beyond was alive and vast, and for the first time in years, she felt completely steady within it. That night, as she tucked Layla into bed, her daughter asked, Mom, are you happy? Maya paused, brushing a curl from the girl's forehead. Yes, baby. I really am. Even though you work so much. Especially because I work so much, she said with a smile. Because what I do helps people. Layla nodded, satisfied, and drifted off to sleep. Maya stepped out onto the balcony, the city glowing beneath her. Somewhere downtown, she knew Alexander was probably still in his office, light burning against the dusk. She thought of that morning months ago when their paths had crossed by accident, the sound of screeching tires, the decision that had cost her everything and given her even more in return. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic and music from a street below. She closed her eyes, breathed it in, and let it go. Tomorrow would come with new work, new people to help, new stories to change. And maybe, somewhere in all that forward motion, their paths would cross again, not out of obligation or longing, but simply because they were both still moving in the same direction. For now, that was enough. And that's how Maya's act of kindness changed not just her own life, but also the heart of a man who thought he'd already seen it all. Sometimes, love doesn't need a perfect ending, just two souls who learn from each other and keep moving forward. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Tales by Shaldra for more emotional and powerful stories every week. Tell us in the comments, should Maya and Alexander ever find their way back to each other? Until next time, this is Tales by Shaldra, where every story touches the heart.